Let's get into today's episode of Why We Succeed.
Ironically and unfortunately, the intersection of the pandemic, because I had 30 days like everybody else to sit in my house and figure life out.
Right.
I was just fortunate to be at a point in my life where I was comfortable with what I accomplished and what I wanted to do next. So I could kind of sit down and build a philosophy or a system around, well, whom I wanted to be. So It's like my mentor, which another thing I've been fortunate to have like 3 or 4, but this mentor said to me, there's points in your life where you go through accelerated maturation. And the pandemic for me was one of them. Like it was a 2-year period where it was like grow up or fail or not, or sit around and feel sorry for yourself. This same mentor actually told me one time, take a day. And I've tailored this over the years because now I pay it forward. I do mentorship as well. Is what he told me is if something goes wrong, goes off the rails, which would inevitably happen in life. He's like, take a 24-hour period, drink, feel sorry for yourself, point fingers at the world, talk about, if this mother this and that mother that, I wish, and if I see them in the streets, it's going to be furniture moving and hands flying, like do whatever you do during that 24-hour period. Feel as sorry for yourself as you want. Drink as much as you need to get all the hangovers out of the way. But he's like, at the 25th hour is over. Like, man up, like, woman up, on the 25th hour, you got to start putting the plan together to stop feeling sorry for yourself. And not my mentor actualized another way my father used to say, and I used to hate it, is it's not your fault, but it is your problem. Because a lot of people get caught up in the blame game, and that's where they'll stay forever, because the blame game feels good because nothing's your fault. Nothing's your responsibility. You ain't got to take no actions. That's why I hated it so much, because he said it to me growing up. So I just got to the point. Back on you. Yeah. I got to that. I got to the point where now, and really what it is, it's there's probably a better way of saying it, but it's practiced accountability. I've been doing it. So like at 25th hour, I was rusty at it first. Sometimes it'd take me a week. It'd take a few hangovers, a couple mistakes. I used to like dark liquor. Can't even really mess with dark liquor anymore. The headache that it gives me now, it isn't even worth it. I switched over to a tequila, man. You might have said, some people might have thought, oh, he stopped drinking. No, I just switched over to lighter liquors. But it's a system that works for me. Is maybe the takeaway there. So to change that a little bit, I haven't had an opportunity yet, but what I would tell somebody is if you were in your 20s, I'd say, take a month, because you haven't had that practiced accountability yet. Right. So take a month to feel sorry for yourself, or a week, cry in the shower, listen to all the R&B songs, all the Chris Brown and Trey songs that you got to listen to. Right. Or, who is it? Eric Bellinger or whatever. I was listening to one dude, Gallant, I think his name is. I'm like, this dude is so sad. Right. I'm like, is somebody checking on this brother? Right. This music right here, this anniversary song, Jesus, is he okay? So I'm like, listen to all that. I've done it all. It used to be Jodeci and Boys II Men for me. So listen to all the sad music that you need to, but at some point, even if it's not your fault, it's going to be your problem, and it will stay your problem until you come up with that accountability and resolution. In your 30s, I say like, hey, you gotta, because people have greater expectations for you. You got to shrink that timeline. But now you had you've had a decade to practice that accountability. So maybe it's a week. Feel sorry for yourself a week. Like life is going to throw some haymakers at you, and it's going to knock you down. Yep. But if you can get that down to a week. And what I've learned is I guess that's a refraction period. The people with the shortest refraction period for recovery get the furthest ahead, because life knocks everybody down. Right. But the person who gets back up and is on to the next journey, next goal, they're much further and faster ahead of the person who's still down. Right. Going back
still in the process of trying to get up, right?
Yes, sir. Going back to that high school callback, I don't know what to call it. I won't use my high school. I'll use a story. This is a true story. I was in Denver. Denver has a great transportation system. I was riding the bus, and there was 2 dudes in front of me on the bus, and they were like Al Bundy's age. They must have been, if I was being generous, they were in their 50s. Okay. It looked like they were in their 70s. And these dudes was going on and on about this high school basketball game that like they should have won, and then they would have been in the D1, and like, Kobe ain't nothing, because I'd have been crossing Kobe over. Wow. If I hadn't torn my ACL in 9th grade. And I'm like, I was aghast. I can't even think of a word that I don't use frequently, but that's where I was. And I was just like, these dudes are stuck in high school. These dudes are my grandfather's age. And first of all, they're on the bus with me.
Right.
Mind you, I was riding to the airport.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm sure they tell this story every week.
Right. It's on a loop, man.
Yeah, exactly. Because it seemed rehearsed. It's like they knew where to jump in. It was like, an Abbott Costello routine. Like, I was like, it's like the Kings of Comedy. I'm like, I know this is not the first time they've rehashed this story. Right. And I was just like, hey, man, judgment-free zone. I wish nothing but peace and love to these brothers. I hope they're still on that bus telling that story. But it's just like, man, y'all, like, come on, man. Come on, dog. Like, you got to have something else to move on beyond that high school crossover. Like, And this was I was a little bit earlier at that time, but I was like, man, I just don't want to be the high school crossover dude. Like, if you ever see me in 2025 writing a blog about, man, if I hadn't messed up my knee in 8th grade, I used to run track in high school. It's like, Michael Johnson wouldn't have had nothing on me in the 400. Man, Usain Bolt, you think Usain Bolt fast? Man, I would have had the same boat. Like, it wasn't for my knee though, boy. Like, if you ever see me writing that, like, I give y'all permission to write it. Be all in the comment section like, Marcus, you washed up. You're not living your life. You're not living your past. And so, like, I guess to get back to the question, like, that's what it was. I mean, some of these things, it might even be self-conscious. Like for the grand scheme of things, probably most people do not care what I'm doing from day to day. But like, I was like, that's actually a good example. I don't want people to care. Mm-hmm. Like, when people are like, man, I'm concerned about Marcus. He's been talking about his knee in 8th grade a lot. Like, I'll end with this. Like, we all have that friend. I'm not going to say which friend. I've got plenty. Right. Saw one this week. And it feels like they always on Facebook with the paragraph. Man, y'all not going to believe what happened. And you're like, I already believe what happened because you've been told 20 more stories. I wasn't going to believe what happened. They always selling some mid-level marketing scheme. And I'm just like, I love this person, So obviously, I still follow him and I wish him nothing but the best in life. Yeah. I'm just saying that's not the path for me. Like, I hope I'm not dropping paragraphs on Facebook, talking about how my track career would have put Usain Bolt to shame. Yeah, that's real. The only other path I know is to evolve. Plural. We all got that friend. I know y'all thinking about it right now. You're like, man, I'm reading one right now. You probably got another tab open reading the paragraph right now. Right. It's like they ain't never wrote a blog or article, but man, on Facebook though. They'd be great. They'd be great if they did, because like they'd be dropping this the stuff people be sharing. I love you don't put this on a public forum. I'm like, wait, ain't this shared to everybody? This ain't even just your friends. That's what's up. I just hit like. I'm like, that's what's up. I wish you the best. Prayers and prosperity. Right. Oh man, I love it. I love the way you break down the passage of your life in those 10-year increments, right? And I'm curious, if we were to highlight each of those 10 decades, what would you say is a highlight that you took away from each of them? Like, what was a great accomplishment from each of those years or each of those periods in time? And then second to that, what would you say is a lesson that you took away from each of those decades? Well, it's a great question, by the way. 20s is pretty simple and straightforward because that's when I paid all the debt. So paying off $30,000 in debt, even in the pathway that I had to go about doing it to achieve it, as I said, securing all those bags and, moving all over the country to do so. It is a great accomplishment. It is probably why I'm having this interview today, because some people ask, like, the story that I tell in there is I got $26,000 in debt, 72 hours. So the quick highlights is I was supposed to pay off 3 credit cards, and I got a consolidation loan. I paid off none of those credit cards. I bought a car with rims, as I talked about earlier. I went out balling, making it rain, living my best puffy life. And so woke up on Monday with $26,000 in debt and a new car. So that's the highlight story. Y'all, right. You can get the book if you want the details and how I got out of it. And I actually got out of that debt in 3 years, which is also fascinating when I finally got focused. So that would be the 20s. And so the lesson from that I share now with 20-year-olds, because I also try to tailor one thing I think my father was really good at, he tailored his advice to the age that I was.
Okay.
I think he was, my dad has a master's in sociology, so maybe that's why, and he was a college professor. I think my dad was really great at tailoring the advice to the age that I was. And he would sprinkle in some like foreshadowing advice. Like, here's some things you need to be worried about the next 10 years. My mom, I think my mom think I'm 25 now. So you can, like, I remember one time I was driving with a friend and my mom, both of our moms, it was funny. We called our moms to let her know we was coming back from Mississippi, driving back to Texas. And both of them were like, do you have your seatbelt on? We was like, Mom, neither one of us had our seatbelts on.
Right.
But that's not the point.
Right.
The point is I'm a grown man.
Facts. Shouldn't be asking me these type of questions.
You shouldn't be. Eventually I'd have put it on myself. I just want to come to that conclusion myself. As a man. Right. So like the 20s would be like you think you know it all. Hey, maybe you do. You might be the 20-year-old that do. I mean, that's another thing. I try not to talk down to 20-year-olds is because they're very wise. Right. One thing I've come to appreciate, I was speaking to some middle schoolers, like this generation,
right.
They're accelerated, man. Like between the internet and the access of information and the acceleration in which they have to grow up. So they're definitely, they're ahead of me. They're ahead of me. I was talking to some middle schoolers. In middle school, I was worried about like, gaming and like remote control cars. That was my singular focus. These kids would ask me about blockchain and crypto and investments. World, man. So, yeah, man. They're like, oh, well, I'm thinking about, getting invested in Apple next month. And what do you think about that? And what's Google's doing? And, the China market's down. I don't know if you heard about this housing crisis. I'm like, I'm Googling while these kids are talking. I'm like, Jesus, man.
Right.
So, that's like the 20s. The 30s, if it was the apply period, going back to my own quote, let's see, the great accomplishment of the 30s. I guess it would be the application. I don't know that any one thing jumps out. So I paid off the debt by 30.
Okay.
I'll share more so this off the top of my head. An accomplishment doesn't jump out. In some ways, that is the point. But someone, actually, it's my father. I'll just go ahead and say it. So my father has turned 71 this year. And he goes, if I was you, why you still remember? And I thought like at first he was messing around, but why you still remember is to go put a spreadsheet together and draw from 0 to your current age or whatever and write down the major events at each that occurred in each year, each 5-year period, whatever you want to break it down to.
Right.
And it was hilarious to me. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. How hard could it be? I could barely remember like 34. And the point that he was trying to make is, days go slow, years go fast.
Right.
And when I was going back and mapping out some of those, what I thought were critical events relative to the age they were taking place, now they are blips on the radar. Like I remember, your first heartbreak, going back to the relationship days and everything. Like I no offense to this wonderful woman who I hope is living her best life. I barely remember her name. Like she broke my heart. And at the time you'd have told me, like, I thought life was over. There's nothing after this. Let me put on this Jodeci, I'm gonna listen to this whole, Diary of a Mad Band CD on repeat,
Right.
And I'm going for the top shelf. I'm getting the Everclear out. Like we just gonna go through it.
Right.
Like I said, the period used to be a little bit longer then. And so I for folks, I would say to highlight that. But for folks, there'll be folks who that makes no sense to them, depending where they are on this scale. Is when I'm in, I tell them to go 4 years back. So when I talk to college students, I go, think about what you thought was the most important event in your life, devastating or great in high school, and how relative is that to you in your day to day now? Right. When I'm talking to 30-year-olds, I say, think about how long or difficult you thought college would be. I used to think college would never end. I thought college was an endless period of time in my life. I took the 5-year plan. So that's also partially contributed to it. But at 39, I couldn't tell you what I did in college. I couldn't tell you the classes I took. I remember 3 professors. And so the fact that a major milestone in 30 doesn't jump out is both telling and fascinating, because while I was 30, I thought every day was crucial and critical, which brings me to now 39. I haven't quite got to my 40s, but I consider it as difficult as they may be, fortunate to have gone through those experiences, because now I can go, someone told me not to let a bad 10 minutes make a bad day.
Right.
And so I can go like, I'm having a bad 10 minutes, hour, 4 hours, 8, 24 week, sometimes it ranges. So sometimes I have a whole bad month, but I have the wisdom to know that next month could be great. Or average. I would say that many more days are just average. They just kind of pass by. And going back maybe to the theme is, how can I make the average days more exceptional and memorable than they otherwise will be?
Right.
And then if or when they are bad, recognizing that that is equally as temporary as the average and great days as well. And on the whole, for me, they've been, I wouldn't even say equal. You remember the bad days. Someone told me they leave, those bad memories are the ones that leave indentions in your brain. But on the whole, you have far more good ones.
Right.
They're less memorable by the fact that they were good. Like if you have a good day, you're more Monday through Friday, you're more likely to forget that day than the horrible Wednesday you had.
Right.
It was less impressionable, but yet it was more frequent. You had 4 good days, but you gonna spend all weekend complaining about Wednesday.
Right.
So
that's real
I try to better balance that mentally. And like I said, that's taking practice accountability. That's taking literal professional help, going to therapy. And it's just taking age, time, and wisdom.
That's good. That's good. Now, when you talked about earlier, the different people that you've had the opportunity to connect with, going from looking for a lawyer and how that ultimately led to you having some opportunities to work with people that you may not have had the opportunity to work with otherwise. I'm curious, when you look at the start of your business, were there any people who kind of sat you down or maybe spoke into your ear like, hey, Marcus, you should consider, going off and doing your own thing? Because as you mentioned earlier, you were a part of a very successful brand. And you ultimately transitioned into, hey, the Marcus Garrett Show. So how did that transition go? Was there somebody that led you in that direction?
I wouldn't say there was necessarily someone that led me in the direction. I think it was a natural, fortunate or again, unfortunate, because, at the end, we'll judge this entire journey.
Right.
Then I'll have 70, 80, or maybe 110 years to look back on. But it was just an inflection point. And so there came a point where it's like, do I continue forward building this brand or my brand? And I didn't have the choice to do both.
Okay.
And I chose myself. And really, I took a risk because I left with nothing. I was like, let me rephrase that a little bit. I left with nothing, but started with 37 years of experience and wisdom. And this was my third business, starting my own. And so although I did not, it was a calculated risk that I thought would be successful. And although I never run my own business or brand, I was like, I have built others' brands and businesses, and I have worked for my employer for 15 years. And I'm a certified internal auditor. I have built systems in multi-million and multi-billion-dollar companies, worked with CEOs that probably make 3 times what I'll make in a year, probably in a day. And I'm like, I'm giving all these advice away somewhat for free. I mean, you could say my salary, but my salary is, like I said, probably they're hourly. I think I can do this. I think I have something here. I think I have the know-how, wherewithal to succeed.
Right.
And then what I tell people is, the down payment for success is failure. And so I came out the gate failing, regretting everything. Like, oh man, I messed up. Like, oh my God. Like, what was I thinking? Yeah, you ain't no entrepreneur. Who you think you is, Steve Jobs, man? Right. So you got to go through all that. And that is where the partnerships and networks started happening. So a book that I highlight all the time now for folks is, I wrote it down, Key Person of Influence. The 5-step method to become one of the most highly valued and highly paid people in your industry. It's by Daniel Priestley.
Okay.
The 5 buckets he uses, he calls it the 5P system, is pitch, publish, profile, products, partnerships. And I will highlight some, and they actually mentioned it in passing. And I give this advice now to people is people see in you what you fail to see in yourself. Typically, based on the averages I've seen, 3 to 5 years before you identify it in yourself.
Okay.
So when I was just a staff auditor, the mentor that ultimately became my friend and mentor was like, I think you have something in you that can make you a supervisor. Can I be your mentor? And we worked on, the skills. He's the one that introduced me to accelerated maturation that I need to improve on to be a supervisor, the mentality that need to change. He's about 10 years my senior. And that's another thing, like if nothing else that comes from age is the wisdom of what doesn't work. Yes. So he's like, don't do this. And there's great value to that. That's called a shortcut. That's called a best practice. That's called accountability. He's like, do not do this.
Yes.
You're doing this. Stop doing that. I joke around now. Like when I'm coaching people, it's like, you doing this. I need you not to do that. But I say it a different way. I was like, you doing this, that's wrong. You need to be doing this, which is right. Now, whatever way you take about actualizing that against that place of peace, like I know for a fact I am right about this. Now you can go off and fight, yell, kick and scream, punch a pillow or a boxing bag like this Marcus man think he know everything. I don't know everything, but I guarantee you this will fail.
Right.
And so
you know what you know.
Yeah, I know what will not work.
Right.
I just think it's about being humble enough to remain coachable. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Marcus Garrett, host of The Marcus Garrett Show, entertaining conversation with your favorite influencers and entrepreneurs about life after debt. And the author of Debt Free or Die Trying, How I Buried Myself $30,000 in Debt and Dug My Way Out on my way to an 800 FICO.